back to the curriculum. My name is Matt Gildersleeve. I am your host. This podcast is brought to you by Hawken Dynamics, the world leader in innovative force plate technology. Hawken Dynamics takes a user-centric approach featuring a fully customizable cloud-based software that allows users to easily digest and analyze complex force plate data. Their technology is constantly evolving, much like an app update for your iPhone. They communicate with users on a daily basis to make their systems better. In addition to all of that, they also offer the most competitive price for a bilateral force plate on the market. And they're the only force plate company offering a completely wireless system. Not to mention their CEO, Bennett Watson, is a genuinely great, authentic human being, and they're just great to work with. We want to thank Hawken Dynamics for their sponsorship. Enjoy the episode. Welcome back, everybody. We're really excited today. Great lineup of speakers. As we continue this Coaches versus COVID-19 mini-series on the curriculum, just want to make sure before we get rolling that I reiterate the important part of this. Really what we're trying to do is continue to fundraise money for the CDP and for COVID-19 and just the efforts of trying to cure that and keep moving forward with everything that we're doing. So remember, if you guys go to the GoFundMe page, you guys can find that, or if you go to coachesversuscovid19.com, that's coaches versus COVID, the numbers 19.com. You can find a link to that GoFundMe page. If you guys are enjoying these, you guys are listening to these, please, if it's a penny, if it's a dime, if it's $1, if it's $100, whatever it is, it helps to those fundraising efforts. So let's keep the important thing, but we got some great knowledge for you guys. Really excited for this episode. And Coach Heiss here is going to introduce our speakers and our episode sponsor, and then we'll get going.
Yeah, Coach, thanks. So, guys, we got one sponsor here for the episode, and, as you heard before, it's Bridge Athletic. So Bridge Athletic builds high-performance training tools for coaches, trainers, physical therapists, and athletes at the highest levels of their field. Bridge Athletic's marketing-leading platform allows industry practitioners to leverage the power of cloud and big data to revolutionize the way performance programs are created, delivered, and tracked. Bridge works with over 250 elite organizations, including teams across every professional sports league and Power 5 NCAA conference, as well as a number of national governing bodies and youth organizations. Bridge's values align with those of Coaches versus COVID-19. They have provided financial support to our cause and have stepped up to support our community by creating a remote product free of charge through the end of the year for school-based coaches. You can learn more about that at bridgeathletic.com, and you guys have heard us talk about Bridge on each of the episodes. We're really thankful for them as a sponsor, but we'll get going here. So, today on the episode, we have a roundtable discussion where we'll be talking about the challenges in this industry and what we can do to improve the foundation for the next generations of coaches. So we're really lucky here to have four guests with us. We have Ashley Jackson, strength conditioning coach at the University of Michigan; Rebekah Gold, assistant strength conditioning coach at University of North Texas; Molly Binetti, women's basketball sports performance coach at the University of South Carolina; and Casey Glass, tactical strength coach. So ladies, thank you so much for joining us today, and we're really excited to hear what you got.
Nailed that, Coach Heiss. Absolutely crushed it. Well, guys, let's start right there. I'm not going to say much more. We talked about this before we got on the air of just some challenges that you guys might have faced, and really anything you guys are willing to share that you think people can grow from, that the challenges in the industry, things you guys had maybe coming up in the industry, or even you guys are still dealing with now. Anything you guys can share, we'd love to hear. Ashley, you want to kick us off?
Sure. I think that there's a plethora of things that we could really speak about. And I think one of the first things that pops into my mind right now is kind of making sure that you bloom where you're planted. And for me, that's come by mistakes and from learning from those. So I've been here at the University of Michigan. It's going on my 9th year. But I would have never said that I wanted to be here that long. I came up here for a part-time position and had huge plans to move on and move up and, be a big time boss somewhere. And every time I started looking outwards, I found myself looking inwards more and looking around me and where I was and really realizing that there was so much more I had to learn from where I was at. And there was no reason for me to look anywhere else. And that's why I continue to stay here, because of the people I'm surrounded with and the supportive administration, the student athletes and the coaches that I get to work with. I still have business and things left undone here. So really making sure that, my feet are firm here was the only way that I was able to continue to give a good service. And not until did I realize that was I able to really give myself fully to the university and to the athletes, and that's what they deserve. So I think really just making sure where you're at gets your full attention is really something that took me a while to understand and accept. But I've loved my time here, and to not have to keep looking around for something new and exciting has made this place perfect for me.
That's an awesome way to start, Ashley. And I guess I'll follow it up with a question of obviously this is a everybody has this of everybody has aspirations, and there's nothing wrong with having aspirations. But what is the balance for you then? I know I talked to Coach Heiss and Coach McNally, my two assistants that work here, and they want to be head guys one day, and I want them to want to be head guys one day. But what is the balance of you having aspirations but doing exactly what you're saying of being where your feet are? What is the balance for you?
Yeah, and that's just something that I've continued to be open and honest with my director about, is what my goals are and aspirations, and kind of what the next steps are for me to be able to take on those roles. And there's really nothing that I can do or would be able to do somewhere else that he won't allow me to do here. So if that's administrative roles, if that's working with the budget, if that's, mentoring other coaches, he allows me to do that, and really has allowed for a huge amount of growth within this position. And I think that that's been super helpful with keeping me here, but also keeping me sane, because we all have a growth mindset and wanting to look outwards and other places. But, he's provided a great spot here and allowed me to dip my feet into so many different spaces and get that experience. So when I find that perfect spot that I do want to move on to, I'm ready.
You'd say just being transparent with him with what your goals are and what you want to do on a daily basis, that's really, really helped you?
Yeah.
I think that's huge. I really don't think enough people do that. I think you gotta know what you want. You gotta know what you want to do. And I think that's an awesome point, Ashley, is if there's a responsibility you feel like you're not getting, or if you've earned that and you feel like you can go talk to the director or the boss or whoever you're working with and ask them for that. I don't have issues with that either. We try to keep everything very transparent. And I think, Coach Heiss has now been with me since 2016 in some form or capacity. And I know that's a conversation we've had a lot is how, what do you want next? What responsibility you want next? And, Heiss, I know you've had a lot more responsibility now than you have, back in 2016. That's for sure. That's really good, Ashley. Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah. I'd really like to piggyback off that. Ashley, I think you made some really good points there. I think when we start out, right, we think it's like this direct path, like, okay, we're going to start out in an assistant's position, then we're going to work our way up, we're going to get to an assistant director, we're going to all be heads or directors someday. And we think that there's a lot of value in the titles that we have, and that's how we grow in our profession, where I think the longer I've gotten into it, the more you realize that the quality of an experience has very little to do with the title that you have, but it's all about in the environment and your ability to, like you said, thrive where you are and be where your feet are. And if you're ever in a position where you're not continuing to grow and you don't have autonomy, or you don't have the things that you value as a professional, then it might be time to move on. But there's always going to be things that are frustrating. There's going to be things that are imperfect about our situations and that we can get unhappy with, and that might steer us to look elsewhere. But when you really realize it, it's about what you make of it and how you decide to grow and what you truly value as an individual, but also as a professional. And so I think, to kind of take that and run with that in a little bit of a different direction is, when we start out, we get into this and we kind of think we know what we're doing, and we think we're usually better than we are. And we learn pretty quickly that we don't know anything. And so it's a really humbling kind of entrance into this profession. I think we all experience that to some extent. Like, I remember being in my first position at 23, and I was just thrown into the fire. I had no idea what the hell I was doing. And I didn't really have much guidance either. And so I just learned by messing up. And then, I spent 1 year at Purdue, and I went to Louisville after that. And I had made more mistakes there than I ever had in my entire life. And it could have been easy to just be like, no, like this, I need to look elsewhere, or, this might not be for me. But when you can take a look back, reflect inward, and realize that you just don't know. You just don't know enough at that point. Like, you've got to find a way to grow, and it relies less on external factors and people and titles and positions, and more so on what is your ability to take criticism, take feedback, continue to learn, continue to grow where you are, and make something of yourself and leave an impact there. It's not about chasing jobs, chasing titles, chasing, Power 5 schools, whatever it is. It's all about the quality of the environment and the people that you surround yourself with, but more importantly, your ability to be humble and learn and grow and realize that you don't have it all figured out.
What did you feel like your biggest mistake was, Molly, coming up? Obviously, I was in a very similar scenario and I made a lot of them, but what was the biggest one that really stood out to you?
Man, I don't know if we have enough time I could cover a lot here, but, I think, kind of like I alluded to, is that, you kind of come in and you think you've got a pretty good grasp of things, and you think we all have an ego and we all have pride, and we're all prideful of our work, and just realizing that there's so much more to our jobs than just knowing how to program and knowing how to, knowing the science behind it, knowing our sports. There's so much more that goes into your growth and just your success as a coach. And it relies on so many other people and your collaboration with them. And I think when you get into it, nobody teaches you how to navigate your career in strength and conditioning. You're just taught, biomechanics, you're taught physiology, you're taught how to program, and then you get into it and then you realize there's all these other human components to what we do. And nobody teaches you that stuff until you just get into it. And so I think most of the mistakes I made were just with mishandling relationships with, whether it's, my supervisors, coworkers, athletes, coaches, just not undervaluing, but just not understanding enough about relationships and how this all works. And so I think there's such a huge coaching and teaching and human element to what we do. I would say that's really 95% of it. And the stuff that you actually learn in school is very little in terms of importance to what we do.
It's a very unique industry in the sense that I feel like once you start feeling really dumb is when you probably are starting to figure it out a little bit. I know the smartest I ever thought I was when I was 16 years old and I was convinced that fat could turn into muscle, and I was just going to convert that over the next off season. And like when you just thought there was one way to do it. And the more you read in this industry, the dumber you feel. And I think that's a very valuable feeling. I always look back at my programs and it's like, this time last year, I thought I was the best version I'd ever been. And I really try to achieve that. And that's very difficult to do. But I look back at our program from a year ago and I would never program like that again. And those little things that you change. And I think that's, to me, that's the important takeaway from what you're saying, Molly, is like, it's okay. Not only is it okay to feel like that, you should feel like that. You should constantly feel like you're challenging yourself and you're growing on a daily basis, on a yearly basis. Rebekah, I saw you unmuted. What do you got for me?
Well, she kept talking and I was going to say one thing and then she kept talking and then I'm like, oh yeah, that's another thing. I think something that all three of you guys have brought up that has always been a challenge for me, and it's something that I continue to see as a challenge for other professionals, it's having that candid and transparent conversation. And whether it is with the strength coach that you share an office with, your direct supervisor, your sport coach, your athletic trainer, anybody else who's working with your athletes, learning and trying to navigate how to have candid conversation with people without hurting people's feelings is huge. If you can learn how to do that, I think that it opens a lot of doors. And in my graduate assistantship, that was the number one thing I learned. And my boss, while I was there, he's still at the Citadel, Coach Boucher. He and I actually took our social science master's degree at the same time. So while I was there going through those classes, so was he. And so it was cool to see him teach us and teach the staff how to implement that social science aspect that Molly was talking about, learning how to navigate people and understanding how to communicate better, and that successful teams and successful organizations don't operate without candid conversation. So if you are able to open up those conversations with your athletic trainer, with other staffs and other people who are working with your student athletes, it only enhances the experience for the student athlete, and you'll probably learn a lot that you didn't know as well, and just it's only going to make you a better strength coach. So I always think that trying to teach others and trying to get better at it myself, just having candid conversation, I think that's something that's really, really important, and something I've learned at every stop I've made along the way.
What is something specific you've done to improve that? Like something you've constantly done to try to be better at confrontational conversations?
I guess the stereotypical way that people have been saying is to drop your ego. But even more specifically, go in with this attitude to try to learn something. So when I'm going into a conversation with my athletic trainer who I've never met before because I just started at a new place, I'm going in with a list of questions. I'm not going in with a list of here's what I'm going to say. I'm not trying to prove my worth. I'm trying to improve the experience. So how many really good questions can I ask my athletic trainer to find out their perspective? What do they think of the weight room? What is their experience with previous strength coaches? What do they see as my role and what I can really do to help this team? Because they know the team better than I do right now. So I think having really good questions is one of the best keys to having candid conversation.
That's awesome. Molly, you kind of hit on the same thing. That was a piece of your learning experience. Do you have anything else as far as advice for dealing with those confrontational conversations?
Yeah, I think, Rebekah, you hit the nail on the head. It's about connection. If you don't have a connection and you don't have a relationship strong enough with that person that can handle the truth, then you're never going to be able to truly have that conversation and have something productive come from it. So I think, like you said, when you lead with questions rather than statements, and you're more interested about learning that person and who they are and their perspectives and where they come from and why they might think a certain way, and not come at it of a place of you're trying to put your foot down and say what you know and say what you think and kind of force your agenda on somebody, it goes so much further. But I think the foundational aspect that you said is you've got to build relationships so strong that they can handle the truth. If you're trying to get on your athletes and you don't have a relationship with them, they're never going to listen to you. When you have that and you're connected with them, that allows you to have those harsh conversations, and they know from where, I guess, the place that is coming from, and they don't just view it as, another person that's trying to hold them accountable to something. And, I think it just goes south when you don't have that. So I think it's all about connection.
It goes back to what you said, Rebekah. I love that was don't prove, improve. That's awesome. I love that. Casey, you've been quiet. What do you got for us?
Yeah, well, I just want to follow up with that. You're talking about, having trouble understanding why the other person doesn't see your side, which can sometimes be confrontational. And everybody's already talked about building those relationships and building that trust. And I 100% agree. Something that I've learned recently, so I'm working with an adult population, and our program's relatively new. So we haven't even been around 10 years yet. These guys have never had strength and conditioning coaches unless they were college athletes. And we have discovered that when they aren't understanding us, they aren't seeing eye to eye with us, or there's a failure somewhere, that the failure often lies in not understanding their expectations to begin with. Because we think we're right and everybody's expectations are the same, and they're just not. If they come in expecting service A and they get service C, they are not going to be satisfied. But if you can have a conversation with them asking what their expectations are, then you're going to be able to speak their language. You're going to be able to speak to their goals, and you will be able to break down barriers that way.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it's one thing, at least I've seen, is you see different people with different strengths and different weaknesses, and some of those strengths are people are strong at being confrontational, but it's their only tool. Or on the other end of it, you find people who struggle to be confrontational or have those hard conversations and they shy away from it. And I think it's about having the ability to have those conversations, not relying on them solely. But relationships, I think, Casey, you hit on the head. Every year, if there's one thing that I try to continue to just really be good at, it's laying out the expectation, because then you eliminate confusion. When they know exactly what they're supposed to do and they don't do it, there's going to be consequences. And consequences are positive and negative. It's not just a negative word. When they do things that they're supposed to do, there's positive consequences. But I couldn't agree more. You have to have and really exude that level of expectation and get all confusion off the board.
And think about your coaches too. You're working with your coaching staff and you've got this great plan for them that is backed by research plus anecdotal evidence. It's been successful for you in the past and they just are not buying in. They may have just had a different expectation, so they think that you're not meeting it, even though you are. So it's more of a conversation surrounding their understanding that you're both saying the same things, maybe just using different language, and that's your barrier.
And this was really eye-opening for me, Casey, is I had a really good opportunity this past 4 weeks to sit in on a leadership development webinar with some head coaches in college football and a lot of generals, whether it be Navy, Army, all across, but some of these 3-star generals. And one of the biggest things that was eye-opening to me is I've always kind of associated explaining why with weakness. Not that I thought it was a bad thing. I just thought that's what people thought. If I have to explain myself why to you, it's a sign of weakness, because if I'm really that strong, I should just be able to tell you what to do and you say, yes, sir, and that's the end of it. And to me, that's how, I've always been a guy that I feel like we've gotten really good buy-in, because we teach, we educate, we tell guys why. But I never in a million years thought that would be a military thing. And one of the biggest things that I've had, and I've really, really surprised me over those last 4 weeks with hearing those generals talk, is almost every one of them hit on the importance and how imperative it is that they explain why to everybody below them. And I'm like, that's how the Army is working nowadays, is that even a general is explaining himself why to a captain. Like, and so to me, it's like, so if our military units are willing to do it, I think as coaches, we're at that point where if you're not explaining why and you think that shows weakness, I think the wagon's passed you a little bit. It's time to get on board,
Yeah, just to give you a little bit of insight, almost every email that I receive on an evolution has the five W's in it: who, what, when, where, why. You have to have those in your email.
Yeah, that was very interesting. Ashley, anything on any of this as far as just talking on confrontation and those conversations?
I think for me, the biggest thing was just practicing. And, I feel bad for my family and my dogs and my coworkers in the office. Like, if I was about to go into, a conversation where I knew that, it might be a tough combo, I practiced it. I said what I wanted to say. I kept my emotions low and controlled. And I told them they could ask any questions they wanted to. And it's even better when it's someone that has no idea that's going on. Because then you get the real questions, like, what are you even talking about? And it's not just within strength and conditioning. And that's something that this is a people business. And we're not just working with coaches and athletes, we're working with administrators and recruits and donors and people within doing for social media. Like, I've spoken to more people outside of strength and conditioning within these past 10 weeks than I ever have. And it's been great. But it's just a people business. It's your ability to communicate, your plan and your ideas in a thorough and, manner so that everyone can understand and be on the same page. But you got to practice those hard conversations, and it just gets easier from there.
Reps for sure. We call it swinging the bat. So I try to tell my interns is you guys got to get up there and swing the bat. You can't watch 3 just go right past you, and you might hit some, you might not. But I think, if I were to analyze repetitions, and I think if anybody here, and you guys can tell me if I'm wrong, but when I look back to confrontational conversations I've had, typically if they were in a high emotional state, they didn't go very well. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I had to learn, especially as a young strength coach, or a younger, I'd like to think I'm still pretty young, but a younger strength coach, was that you got to remove emotion out of it. And to me, to the point where if, I would even try not to have the conversations until I could sit back and not be emotional. Sometimes that's not a possibility. There are situations where there just is emotion, there's emergency or whatever it may be. But I think, doing your best to remove emotion from that situation is always going to make that conversation go a lot better as well. We're kind of at that halfway point. I just want to make sure we save enough time for this, because I think this is really important, and we can go, a few different directions. But let's talk specifically about our industry and some of the challenges that we face in it, but really what are you guys doing to improve it? And what do we need to do by the time we hang up our whistles? What is something that maybe a goal you have or something you think we need to do to continue to improve this industry? Go ahead, Rebekah. You lit up first, so.
Okay. Honestly, this is something that I continually struggle with, and I never realize it until a year later when I'm back at the same part, a year later, and I look back at what I did. And something that my bosses have tried to do for me since the start is to save me from myself. And I think that that's something we can do for the younger strength coaches as well. And what I mean by that is, just because you're willing to do everything doesn't mean you should do everything. And I think the best way I've heard somebody put that is that today's favors are tomorrow's expectations. So as a graduate assistantship, I was working with 5 or 6 teams. I was taking my master's classes, doing this and that, and running the internship program and all my other responsibilities. And I would still try to get over to my sport practices. And I would still say, oh yeah, I could do this. And I would take on more, and I would take on more, and I would take on more. And finally, my boss had to say, stop. You're only getting 3 hours of sleep at night. And now you're coming in and you're not the same coach for your morning group as you were 2 weeks ago. You have to stop. And from that point, he started putting barriers on me. He started saying, you're not allowed to take a 6 a.m. team more than 3 days this week. And so that means if you want to do a 4-day split, too bad. You better find a way to do a 3-day split with that team, or, put one of those sessions in the afternoon, but you can't have 6 a.m. teams every day. You need more sleep. And he put these little barriers on me throughout so that, to protect me from myself and from trying to take too much on. And now, I say that looking back, and that was my first and second year as a strength and conditioning coach, yet I still find myself doing that to myself. Even now, when I can't even go into work, I still find myself with a full schedule. I'm like, how am I doing this? But I think that the more that we're able to do that for these young coaches, the more we can prevent things like burnout, and the more we can prevent things, like just cynicism about something that we're actually really passionate about and that we actually do care about. And if we're taking care of ourselves, and if we could teach them to take care of themselves, they're going to be better for the student athlete.
Yeah, 100%. That's a tough one, Rebekah. That's a one that requires a lot of balance, because you, as a boss, you need to be very careful how you relay that message, because one, that's, I don't know you really well, Rebekah, but I can already tell you that's what separates you. That's what makes you special, that you're willing to do that. But unfortunately, in this world, there's people that'll take advantage of that, and that's not right either. And you can't always necessarily pick who you work for. And sometimes you're stuck in a position where you have to take a job. You have to put food on the table, and you might be in a position where you don't have a boss that does take care of you. I think it's imperative that when you do get a chance, or when you are overseeing people, that you do take care of them. It doesn't mean that you're necessarily always going to be in that position, but I've had multiple conversations with my staff where I've said, if you're here at 7 p.m. tonight, you're fired. If you don't take your fiance on that vacation, you're fired, right? And those are guys in this chat that I've had that conversation, and that's an important thing. But I think You heard James Franklin say this. It talks about when people work for him, he absorbs that responsibility of a supporter, of supporting the marriage, of supporting the fatherhood or the motherhood, of supporting them as a leader and teaching them how to be a leader, of supporting their work habits. And so I think that's a big part of it is I agree, Rebekah, when we are and we rise and we're getting into these positions, you got to take care of the people around you and you got to show them the way. But it's certainly a balance, because there's also the other spectrum where if you tell a young coach that, they will take advantage of that, of just not doing anything. Because I don't know, and maybe, Molly, Ashley, and where you guys are, maybe you guys have seen this with younger coaches, but inherently, this is obviously a general statement, but younger coaches are getting lazier. I'm having a more difficult time finding good quality interns now than I was 5 years ago. And maybe that's just random. Maybe that's just luck of the draw for us. But it certainly seems like Rebekah, the kind of people out there like you, I would find people that are willing to work like that a lot in 2012, 2013, 2014. But it's been few and far between since. Not that we haven't had any, but it's been a little few and far between. Anybody else have anything on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think people have gotten smart. It's not, I mean, I run the internship program here, and, that's one of the things that we talk about even in our initial phone calls. They're like, do you have any advice for me? Like, oh, what should I think about or read about before I come in? And I said, you need to figure out if you really want to do this, because honestly, there's so many other things that you could do that if you're not extremely overly passionate about when you come in the first day, wiping things down, turning things on, doing things the right way, that you're not going to be passionate about getting up at 4 a.m., 6 days a week, or, spending holidays or family birthdays, with someone beside your family. Like, there's a lot of sacrifices that we have to make as coaches, that goes by the wayside, And so it's just, for me, the internship in the beginning is all about figuring out if this is right for you. And I don't think a lot of people are willing to even take that opportunity to see if it is, because they're like, oh, I can go do a paid internship somewhere and I can have a 9-to-5 desk job and I'll be okay doing that. And so I think that comes along with the generation, of youngsters that are coming up. And they're just figuring out other ways to get a paycheck. And we all know that this isn't easy. So I would rather have quality over quantity as far as, interns and people that are entering the profession. And if we need to mold and help people grow and mentor them, as they come up, we'll do those with, with the right people. But I would much rather have one quality coach than 5, half-assers.
Yeah. This is what I get a lot now is I'll get a, dear Coach Gildersleeve, my name is blank. I am an exercise science student at the University of Buffalo. I want to be a strength coach someday. Here is a 2-page interview. Will you fill it out and send it back to me? 1, no, you don't want to be a strength coach. And 2, no. But if you want to come to my office and you can have this conversation like a normal human being and I can give you the answers, sure. But yeah, we've had some, plenty of good ones, but it's definitely trended that direction, at least from our standpoint. I agree. Casey, what do you got for us?
So we don't have an internship program. I've had one before, but it was back when you said it wasn't too difficult to find some hardworking interns. But just a reality check for anybody thinking about getting into this field. I've been in this field for about 12 years. I work at a high level and I still wipe down benches. Especially now with COVID, I'm going to be cleaning like every other hour. So the majority of my job is going to be janitorial for a while. And that's fine because it comes with a lot of really great things too. And I highly suggest reading the book Legacy. It is about the New Zealand All Blacks and it talks about having this sweep the shed mentality. So you have this championship rugby team who has been winning for decades, extremely successful, and making millions of dollars, and they're still cleaning up the locker room and leaving it better than when they found it. They are still literally sweeping the shed. These are the Kobe Bryants of rugby. So if you don't have the sweep the shed mentality, then this is not the profession for you.
Yeah, no, that's a great book. That's awesome. Casey, what about you? What do you think particularly that we can do something to lead this industry better when we leave it?
So I think the best thing that we can do, especially those in this group, you're further along in your careers now, open doors for the next generation, open diversity doors, push for diversity on your staffs and in your hiring process, in your internship programs, open salary doors. The more that you can make, so the more that I can negotiate for my position, then the higher that salary is going to be for the person that fills it when I leave. Break glass ceilings. So that's a huge one. There's a lot of females on this podcast today, so I know that you know what I'm talking about. If we can get into positions that weren't available to females before, that's going to make it easier for the next person to come in. That position is now going to be more open and accessible to more people. So if you can do that now, then you're leaving behind a huge legacy and you're creating opportunities for people that may not have had them if you don't do it.
Obviously, being a female in this industry is that there's a lot of challenges that come with that. What's been the biggest challenge for you, Casey?
So I've had a lot of support from a lot of coaches. I've honestly had very little to no issues with my with my male athletes. But I have had a lot of issues with male colleagues in their gender bias. And they don't think they have it, but the reality is we all have bias. I have bias in all kinds of different ways. And you can go to the Harvard Bias website and take a test and kind of learn more about yours. But, I've pitched several ideas that were shot down in meetings only to be presented by a male colleague a few months later. And then he's told they're a great idea and it's picked up immediately. I have to prove my knowledge over and over and over again. It's always in question, no matter the amount of resources, research, anecdotal evidence that I have to back it up. I just, in some positions, still feel like I'm treated like lesser than amongst the team of strength coaches, not with the athletes. And that just needs to change.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that to me is just pure numbers, and continuing to improve that is just when I always think about, if you think about the top 10% of our industry, it's predominantly male, white. And so what is it? Let's just say there's 1,000, but there's only 100 female strength coaches. Well, the top 10% then of the males is going to be 100 versus top 10% of the females is going to be 10. And so until we can start to make those numbers more equivalent that's the first step, is just getting more notoriety, getting more female coaches in the industry, so that 10% isn't 10. That 10% can be 50, 60, 70, 80. And I think the respect level is going to go up a lot.
Representation is very important. When I first took this job, so I'm the first female strength coach that these operators have probably ever seen. In the first few years, they were a little surprised or even suspicious about what I was doing there, what my role really was. But fast forward 6 years later, nobody even bats an eye because they've had female strength coaches at their schools. They've seen that representation. So it does change with the culture. But anything we can do to help move it along, it just comes down to humility. Like we've already touched on, a good strength and conditioning professional knows how much they don't know. And that's not just for your exercise science knowledge, your programming knowledge. That's not knowing how your own biases show up, not knowing what other people's experiences are. So just approaching conversations with humility. And specifically on this topic, if you have a female staffer or colleague who asks you, would you say that to a male? Don't take that as offense or attack. Like, just take a step back and listen and just go over what you question yourself that trust can do. No, if I have a training philosophy and somebody says, are you sure that's the right training philosophy? Why don't you think it over some more and think about a.
Yeah. And with everything in general going on in the country right now, it's obviously it's terrible, terrible stuff. And I just think the more we can just try to have some empathy and humility and just listen, not try, because at the end of the day, I will never understand what it's like to be a female in this industry because I'm not a female in this industry. I'll never understand what it's like to be an African-American because I'm not. And so the thing is what you said, is just listening and at least trying to understand that perspective and not just ignoring it. And, I'm hoping in a lot of realms that we'll grow a lot from this. And I'm hoping this is a catalyst to growth in many ways, is what, you can only hope there's some positive that comes out of this. And you hope that it's a catalyst to growth in all of these things that we're talking about. So no, thank you. Thank you for that perspective. Anybody else on some of the challenges or some of the things we can do to leave it better?
Yeah. Casey, first of all, great points. I think all of us could continue to talk about that portion of challenges for a long time, but I kind of want to take it a different direction. And I really don't know any of you very well in this group, and I don't think you know me, but before I get into it, this is something I think that weighs on my heart a lot when I think about our industry and where I want it to be. And I'm going to be honest and I'm going to be straightforward, and I think it might piss some people off, and it might offend some people. That's not my intention. I'm just going to say what I observe and how I see it. As Ashley, I think you said we're all really growth-minded individuals in our profession. I think strength coaches are some of the most disciplined and constantly learning individuals that I've ever met. When I look at how our industry views growth, it seems to be that we're just trying to intake as much knowledge as possible at all times, right? We're trying to learn about all these different ways to train, and we're trying to learn about all the science and this data, this wave of data now. And, I think all of us have gone back to this is a people business. So if we're going to make the most growth and the most progress in our profession, should we really be spending all of our time trying to make better programs? Like, how much does that really matter? Like, physiology doesn't change. Biomechanics don't change. Like, yeah, we can learn some new things to tweak our programs, but if we're talking about a people business, and, I look at the state of our industry right now, if we're going to grow, we need to grow in professionalism. We need to grow in, how many other professions have more than one governing body because the two can't figure out how to operate together and they can't figure out what our standards are? How many other legitimate professions have hundreds of certifications that you can get? Like, if we're going to make true progress for our industry and make it better for those underneath us, like, we need to have higher standards for ourselves. We need to have higher professionalism. We need to come together and figure out a common way to operate and to have certifications and to work together. Like, the back and forth and the things that we argue about, to me, it just seems so wild. And we still struggle from people's perceptions of us. Like, people still think we're clowns. People still think we're the people that run up and down the sidelines and just yell and scream. And, like, yeah, that's part of it. And, like, I'm not discounting that at all. But, like, if we're going to grow, how are we going to be better leaders? How are we going to be better people for our athletes? How are we going to bring more value to our organizations, in our institutions? How are we going to bring more value to our athletes? And I think that comes from, like, we've got to find a way to hold higher standards for ourselves across the board. And right now it's just, like, depending on where you work, depending on what organization you're a part of, like, I'm part of the CSCCA and the NSCA, and, like, some of my CEUs count for one organization and some of them don't count for the other one. Like, that is wild to me. That's so wild to me. And I think it's unacceptable. So I'm going to hop off my pedestal here, but I just see the state of where we're in, and there's so many amazing individuals in our field, and there's so many people doing great work. And when I think about the problems, I don't want to just state the problems. I want to be part of it. And I've been trying to spend my time figuring out how we make it better, but we've got a lot of work to do if we're going to continue to legitimize ourselves as actual professionals and not just strength and conditioning coaches.
Ashley, you got something?
Yeah, I mean, and this goes back to what Casey was saying and on Molly as well, but talking about representation, like, not just for females, but when I'm out coaching and representing my school, I also have it in my heart I'm representing all of the female coaches out there. And I feel like such a strong like level of support from them, even when I'm not hearing from them or getting advice, but in just what I'm doing and how I'm representing myself. I think that really helps like me keep my standard and know that the services that I'm providing and the role that I'm filling for my school is also, you know, giving a idea to maybe one of the athletes that I'm coaching that this is a viable choice for them. But and maybe not even as a strength coach, but just as a strong female, or just as someone that can voice, you know, what they want well, or that can lead. Like there's so many other things that I can represent through this platform that drives me to continue to do it. But it's from support. You know, I don't know Molly that well, or Rebekah or Casey, but I know that they would support me in the choices that I make and the steps that I take to move forward, because we all have the same viewpoint as far as what we want this industry to become. And gosh darn it, I mean, like by the time that I'm done, you know, being a strength coach, whether that's in 5 years or 20 years, like it better be better, because it wasn't easy being in here like the first 10 or 11 years. It wasn't easy at all. And because I'm stubborn, that's why I'm still here. Not because I'm a great strength coach. It's because I put my foot down and I said, I'm going to make this work. And people surrounded me and helped me figure it out. And I'm going to continue to do that for whoever also wants to be stubborn and maybe stupid. But it's going to be better. It's got to. And I want to be a part of that.
It's awesome. Thank you for sharing. Rebekah?
I just want to bounce off of what both of them have said. And Ashley, you kind of alluded to this idea of almost recruiting. Like when we see in our athletes somebody who we know could be a great, whether it's strength coach or representative, somebody who would be great on our platform, we got to recruit them. I've had plenty of athletes that I'm like, come be my intern. Come do this. Like, do you want to coach your sport someday? Oh, maybe you want to try strength and conditioning. Come be my intern. No, you don't know anything about programming. I don't care. I can teach that to you. Your foundation, your character, your qualities, those are the things that will make you great on this platform. And the X's and O's of what you're teaching, you can learn that. But we can't teach somebody who doesn't have that, the character or the drive, somebody who doesn't have a selfless value, somebody who doesn't want to help others. We can't teach them to be great strength coaches. You have to have that drive to want. And so I think that that's something that I've really tried to do with my internship program is recruit people who I don't really care where their expertise lies. But if I see through my interview process or through just meeting them, if I see that they have these like valuable qualities, I'm going to recruit them and say, hey, I know you're a photographer and I know that's what you're passionate about, but I could see that you want to help people. Would you come be my intern and help me grow my social media game and the weight room social media? And you can help take pictures and you could teach me this. And get yourself around the athletes a little bit, and maybe that'll open up some doors for you in whatever capacity. I've hired, like I just said, I've hired a photographer. I've hired a research guy to be my internship. He really didn't have any experience on the floor, but research is something that I struggled with, but I know it can benefit my student athletes. So I said, hey, will you come be my research assistant and help me in that manner? And he's grown to be a great floor strength coach. I've hired kids who are on a PT track to be my interns. And I think through doing all of those things and hiring people with a slightly different X's and O's expertise helps with what Molly was saying about all these different certifications that we can have and all these different things. Maybe we can create more positions. Maybe we can create more positions that have slightly different expertise, but all of us can collaborate together to help the student athlete experience. And I think that can only push our field to grow even more.
I'll just, my 2 cents, and once again, this is an opinion. I don't know everything, that's for sure. But, I think one of the worst things we do as coaches sometimes is put ourselves in boxes. And we've been lucky to have some really good female interns over the years, but one thing I've always encouraged them to do is to never put themselves in a box of we do a lot of evaluation with our interns, whether it be them filling them out, us sitting them down. And I had a female intern very early in my career that asked me to evaluate her as a female strength coach. I said, no. I said, I'm going to evaluate you as a strength coach. I don't want you to ever think that you're good for a female. I want you to just be a good strength coach, period. I said, don't you dare ever put yourself in that box. Just be great. We've had bad female interns, and they've said that I've evaluated and they said, oh, I'm bad. It's because I'm a female. I said, no, it's because you're a bad coach. You're just a bad strength coach. There's nothing to do with you being female. We have 2 female interns right now. They're absolute freaking rock stars, and they're just rock stars. They're not rock star females. They're freaking rock stars. They're unbelievable. We love them. They'll coach circles around other interns we've had in the past, and they're not just good for females. They're good. And I would never want to compliment, oh, you're good for a young kind of guy. Yeah, you're good for that. Like, I want to be great. I want to be a great strength coach. I don't want to put myself in a box. So that's something I've always tried to challenge young coaches in general, but especially when I've had those conversations with young female interns, is don't put yourself in a box. Don't be a great female strength coach. Be a great strength coach, and everything else will work out.
Yeah, I got to circle back and finish up a thought because it's just going to eat away at me. And back to what Molly was saying, we can speak about this as much as we want, but unless you're willing to sacrifice some time and get involved, and whether that's volunteering with one of these organizations, there's so many committees. The NSCA, for example, is a volunteer-led group. And so get on a committee, have a space to have your voice heard. And that's one of the best things that I've been able to do as far as reaching out to more of a broad spectrum and actually giving opinions and listening to, why we can't do some things one way is volunteering for a committee. And when we have open spots, I can barely get, 7 applications. And I don't understand that. It takes a very minimal amount of time, but people want to complain about this and that, and they don't want to jump in and help out. So whether it's whatever organizations you support or have those certifications, you got to jump in, wholeheartedly and give back to and help. We're talking about growing and we're talking about changing this industry. You got to volunteer.
100%. Casey, anything else you have before we close?
I just wanted to piggyback off of you a little bit when you were talking about not putting yourself in a box and extrapolate that out a little bit. And just to remind people who are interested in coming into this career, it may seem like a sexy career on the outside. Maybe you get to be on TV at football games, but the reality is you're not just a strength coach. You are going to touch so many lives, and especially at the collegiate realm, young, impressionable lives. These kids need your support. I've had so many coaches who I felt were not right for that job. And if we want to be a professional organization, then we have to make sure that we are hiring people who aren't just good at the sports stuff, aren't just good at the strength and conditioning stuff, but they're incredible mentors and have very high character, and that is their why. Their why isn't because they wanted to work at an SEC school. Their why isn't because they want a bunch of W's behind their names and rings on their fingers. Because in this position, it's not about you. If you're in coaching to bring glory to yourself, you're in the wrong field. You are there to help others. It's a service, and that's how you should look at it.
Thank you. Awesome. Molly, anything you have before we close?
No, I think piggybacking off that thought too of putting ourselves in boxes. I think if I could go back and tell my younger self one thing that I've learned is that it doesn't have to look a certain way. And I think when we get into this field, we learn from people that have been in it for a lot longer than us. And we inherently, are taught to do things a certain way. And we're kind of taught to, act a certain way. We're taught this is how you do it. This is how you be a strength coach. And I think the more that you get into it, it's not always in line with who you are. And it's not, just because you've been taught that it's supposed to look a certain way doesn't mean that it has to look a certain way. And so I think as we continue to grow in our roles and in our field, we figure out how to be authentic to ourselves. And I think we take a little bit of everything that we've learned from all these different people, but just because, you know, we're taught that our role is supposed to be a certain way, we're supposed to act and have this persona about us, doesn't mean that we have to. And you're never going to have success or really have joy in what you do if you're not doing it in a way that works for you and that's authentic to who you are. And I think that's sometimes hard to stray from what is maybe mainstream in our field and how we see other people coaching and acting and doing things. But, you know, I'd say to the younger generation, and I think that's our responsibility, is to show them that, and just show them that there's another way, and you've got to be who you are, and you can't put yourself in a box. I've never once thought of myself as a female strength coach. Like you said, I'm just trying to be a badass strength coach, and I've never had to really think about that, but I know that's what other people have in their minds. So here I am on another tangent, but I agree with what all of you guys have said. You know, we've got a lot of work to do. It's not going to happen by just talking about it. We've got to take action on it. And I know that we're all trying to find ways to better ourselves. And I think in that, we continue to move forward.
Awesome. Rebekah, any final thoughts?
Thanks for having us. Thanks for having me. I really, really enjoyed this. This is fun. So thank you.
Absolutely. It was an absolute pleasure having you guys, and Casey, Ashley, Molly, Rebekah, thank you so much for coming on and taking your time. We really appreciate it, especially for the cause and everything. So once again, guys, if you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget what we're doing this for right now, which is for the Coaches versus COVID-19. You can go to our website at www.coachesversuscovid19.com. Once again, guys, thank you so much. Really appreciate you guys taking your time. We will see you guys on the other side.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Matt.